Well, welcome everyone to our first Conservation Happy Hour of 2024. Special thank you to those of you joining who are supporters, corporate sponsors, zoo partners, and of course, polar bear patrons. And if this is your first Conservation Happy Hour with us, welcome to our learning community. We typically host around 3 Conservation Happy Hours throughout the year, and we hope you'll enjoy this one and join us for future events. I'm Amy Cutting, and I'm really excited about today because we're going to be hearing from a variety of PBI staff today about the conservation work that you folks make possible last year and what's in the works for this year. But first, for those of you who may be new to these events, we always encourage you to submit any questions that you have for the panelists via the Q&A feature on your toolbar at the bottom of your screen. And there's only the panelists will be able to see those questions. And there's also a feature to submit your question anonymously if you would prefer to do it that way. You can put in a question at any time, and we'll answer them all after our initial discussion. We'll also be recording this session, and we'll share the recording with you over email. Of course, if you have family, friends, or colleagues who might be interested in this work, we'd appreciate it if you would share it with them and help us expand our community. Okay, we're going to go ahead and dive in. The panelists can turn on their cameras and join us. And I'll have each of them introduce themselves as we get going. But we're going to start today. You'll be hearing today about research, coexistence, programs, our field work, and some policy highlights. But in order to get through everybody, we've asked everyone to choose just a single highlight from last year and something that they're really excited about happening in 2024. And we'll begin by pitching it over to Geoff York, who's our Senior Director of Research and Policy first. Geoff, bring us into the world of polar bear research. What's something we're celebrating from 2023 and focusing on for 2024?
Sure, thanks, Amy. Yeah, looking back at 2023, we had another just stellar year on the research side, super busy, lots of productivity, but one project that stood out for me was wrapping up our Burr on Fur project. This is a project hopefully most of you've heard about. It's a multi-year project where we were trying to come up with alternatives to collaring and also ways to attach tags to adult males and subadults specifically, since they can't wear collars safely. So we worked with partners at 3M, partners with our zoo and aquarium folks, and also partners across the polar bear world as far as researchers in the wild to both design and test tags in captive settings and on wild polar bears. You can see some of the photos of those tags here. We ended last year with our longest captive deployments at Cochrane Habitat in Ontario. We had 2 bears there, almost wear the tags for 3 months, which was by far a record on the captive side, and I think might have beaten or at least come close to matching the longest tag we saw deployed in the wild. So that was super cool. We've finished up that work with a publication looking at a number of deployments in Southern Hudson and Western Hudson Bay. And we're going to follow on, hopefully, with a publication regarding the captive work there. So super excited to wrap that work up with 1 and hopefully 2 scientific publications and a new tag that's ready for use in the wild. And then looking ahead, 2024, I just got back from Svalbard, Norway. This place, it was amazing. We got incredibly lucky with weather during a time in the spring where we've been seeing this happen the last few years, but we had kind of a burst of warm-ish weather for that high in the Arctic. We saw temperatures to just slightly above freezing. Part of the time there, that brings clouds and also strong winds. So we were super lucky to get out a record number of den monitoring camera systems. This is our project that gets out on that landscape and looks at the behavior and of moms and cubs when they come out of their dens, the timing of that emergence. And we're also looking at things like body condition and success. Here's a picture of the team at the end of the season. We were exhausted. We ran hard to get 5 complete den camera systems out. We encountered weather like you're seeing in this video, some very high winds, causing us in this case to retreat down mountain for a safe helicopter pickup from where we deployed the den camera system. So super successful year there, fabulous landscape to work in, and wouldn't be possible without our team. Christian Zoli, who's new to us this year, Joanna Zolich, both made everything super smooth in Svalbard, and then our partners absolutely at Norwegian Polar Institute. And this year we had on-the-ground support from the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance on the tech side, which was fantastic. So that's it for me.
All right, great. Nice to hear updates from a good field season. Okay, let's turn it over to Alysa McCall, our Director of Conservation Outreach and a staff scientist. Alysa, over the last few years, you've been supporting this coexistence work between polar bears and people in a rapidly changing Arctic, and it's become a growing part of PBI's work. Can you tell us a little about why this work is so important, and a quick highlights of 2023 and what's on the docket for 2024?
Absolutely. So in a warming world, polar bears are going to spend more time on land in more places and come into contact with humans more often. And this, of course, can be dangerous both for bears and for people. And if we want to see polar bears continue to roam the Arctic for many generations, then we have an obligation to also support the people that will be living more closely with those polar bears. So 2023 was a great year for our coexistence efforts. Things had slowed a little bit after COVID because it made it so much more difficult to get into these small communities. You don't want to bring anything with you in terms of sickness, of course. But in 2023, things really opened up, particularly in southern Hudson Bay, which is in the province of Ontario in Canada. So we have been working with 7 different communities across Hudson Bay through our partners at York University, Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources, and Environment Canada. And 2 main communities we're working with, we were able to host workshops last year with those community members. So we sent a consultant, Gord Stenhouse, up, who's a bear expert, and he was able to give deterrence trainings to people. And I should mention too that these are things the communities asked for. We're not going into communities saying, we think you need this. We're really building relationships over many years with these different communities and saying, what do you need? What would help? And so these deterrence trainings have been identified as something that people want. So a lot of these places, they never used to see polar bears, or if they did, it was not very often. And they're seeing polar bears more and more. So how can they move polar bears away, scare them away, stay safe on their land? So along with meeting and talking about training or providing supplies, this is an example of a bear trap. We are helping build a better polar bear trap that can more safely capture and transport a polar bear. So we're very excited about this. That's been in the works. We're also providing all sorts of things like cracker shells and bear sprays, these non-lethal or less lethal deterrents that might be more accessible than a shotgun in some situations. And then we are doing actual training in the field, so hands-on stuff where people are getting to experience. I think we have a couple of videos here that are a bit loud. Give you a sense of that. So lots of screamer, so that you can imagine would scare polar bear away. So both daytime and nighttime. Nighttime is important when you're on the land, and this involves a different, we gotta light up the sky first. Oh, damn. So that's pretty neat. So we've been able to do those in communities. And I should say that the Polar Bears International staff also took part in some of these trainings last fall in Churchill. It was very helpful for us. And another exciting thing we did was released a round of handouts translated into Cree, which is the local language. And these were asked for, and we worked with the communities to refine them and hand them out to people that were curious about, hey, how do we secure our cabins? What do we do if we see a polar bear? So these handouts have been a good success, and we'll continue to work on that model. That was 2023. Oh, I guess, yeah, Churchill Bear Smart Working Group 2023 made some good progress there. This is a group of stakeholders in Churchill made up of people from the town itself that sit, on the town leadership, local guides, tourism companies, Polar Bears International, stakeholders that want to support polar bears and the economy of Churchill. There's a lot of different priorities that the working group has, and we've been able to move some of those forward last year. And then, well, one of the best ones, we have another video for you, is we were finally able to, with Handcraft's help, create a series of safety videos with the town. And those have been a big hit. Our idea is to have tourists watch the videos before they come to town, so they get a good sense of how to have polar bear etiquette and support the polar bears and the people that live there. That was a working group. We've got a little video for you there.
How fast do you think you are? Have you won any medals recently? The average person can run about 8 kilometers an hour. But a polar bear can run faster than an Olympic athlete, more than 40 kilometers an hour. So you do the math and never approach a polar bear.
I have not won any medals recently. And that's just one example of, I think 7 or 8 different short videos that are available on churchillbearsmart.ca as well. So those are super fun. So in 2024, I mean, our big goal is to keep pushing all of these projects forward. We just got renewed funding for our project in Southern Hudson Bay, which we're very grateful for the next 2 years. We need a lot of that support, so we're so grateful for that. We'll continue to work in communities, expand our trainings and what we can offer. They're also interested in having more wildlife monitors. So people that their job is to patrol the communities and watch out for polar bears, very exciting. And for the Churchill Bear Smart Working Group, we will continue that work as well. And one of the priorities for this year is seeing if we can get a sort of tool library for locals. So if folks are going out on the land, can they rent for free a bear spray or a banger or something from us, again, instead of a shotgun? So lots of exciting things there. And then this year, so this is an example of one of the coloring books we've created over the years. We have different versions, one specifically for Churchill. We've got one for Greenland. We made one for Russia several years ago. And this year, a big goal for us is to lean more into the Svalbard coexistence work. And we have a lead, Joanna, over there, who Geoff mentioned. She's working up a beautiful, brand new Svalbard-based coloring book, as well as supporting other coexistence efforts in Svalbard. They have a bit of a different situation over there in terms of what tools they're allowed to have and carry. So any influence we can have over there and relationship building over time to improve that for bears and people, we'll be working on it. So thanks.
Excellent. Sounds like there's a lot going on. And actually, we're going to stick. Well, and I'm going to have you keep talking, because another pillar of PBI's work, our conservation programs and education, are also under your purview. So I think you're going to keep the floor here and share with us one of your key highlights from 2023.
Yeah, so this is our Svalbard Icehouse, which we were so excited to launch last year. So in the summer of 2023, we put up this kind of clear dome as an interpretive space in Longyearbyen on Svalbard. And it's a great meeting space. So many of you might know we have the Polar Bears International House in Churchill, Manitoba, with an interpretive center, and we can have many folks there. We wanted something for Svalbard. Svalbard sees thousands upon thousands of visitors a year. And so this is really a market we wanted to capture and talk to about polar bears and climate change and conservation. So with this little dome, we were really successful last year for our first season. It was open for only 39 days in total, but over 4,000 people visited. And we also hosted community events around the Icehouse. So the official opening celebration had 146 people attend. There were 2 Q&A evenings with the Svalbard Guides Association, and 79 guides attended, which is amazing. We also had different special groups, government officials, documentary film crew, and a social media influencer whose video about the Icehouse reached over 118,000 views. So really exciting, and we're keeping it going in 2024. We are opening it again for our first spring season. We'll be open April 8th to 26th in Svalbard. So we'll see how that goes. We're really excited. We think it's going to be great, a little chillier, but lovely. And then we'll open again this summer, and we're really excited to keep this as part of our long-term programming.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. Well, thank you. And let's pivot over to Marissa to share one of our other programmatic priorities for 2024. Marissa is our Director of Conservation Programs. Marissa, PBI's got a lot going on in 2024. Tell us about something that you're particularly excited about.
Yeah, so, another way that we can continue to share the polar bear story with those that we're coming into contact with is to work with our partners. And we do that primarily through building capacity through our Climate Alliance program. And that's primarily with our Arctic Ambassador Center partners. So we're super thrilled to have wrapped up another productive year of that program. Last year, we worked with 19 Zoon Aquarium educators and animal care staff representing 3 countries. We were in North America, the US, Canada, and Belgium, which brings our total of Zoon Aquarium staff to just under 250 folks that we've been working with in that program throughout the years. And I think one of the most important takeaways from that when we're continuing to share the polar bear story and to build capacity is that these Arctic Ambassador Center partners are seeing some over 200 million visitors come through their gates every year. So it's an incredible opportunity to share that story. One of the pictures, well, the 2 last pictures you were seeing here is in addition to working virtually for about 7 months, where folks are getting to know each other and building their literacy in climate science and effective climate communications and polar bear natural history, is we're all attending an in-person summit in Churchill, Manitoba each year. And so you can see the group here learning from one of the Indigenous knowledge keepers in the area, in addition to meeting with Polar Bears International partners and subject matter experts. And as you can imagine, it's a pretty powerful experience and really a launching point for these folks to return home and work with their Arctic Ambassador Center teams to affect change. And also, most importantly, I think, is that you can see the group here having a bunch of fun, is that these folks are really building trust within each other and within the network and lasting bonds that are so important in this work, because, you know, the emotional weight of conservation work and sharing the polar bear story and, you know, eco anxiety and climate change is a heavy one. And so the more that we can build our network and build a community support, you know, the stronger that we'll be together. So we're really looking forward to next year's cohort, or rather this year. Can't believe it's 2024 already. Where we're pretty excited to be innovating, what we consider to be innovating when working with conservation staff, marketing and communications staff, and advocacy and government affairs staff. And so we know that advocacy is for everyone, whether you're sharing important polar bear news, submitting public comments, or, you know, engaging with your civic leaders. And so we're excited to be working with another cohort. And if I could share another exciting piece that we're working on for 2024, we partner with the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation. And in 2023, we secured some grant funding to expand what's NOKI for short, the crash course to an audience in Canada. And so registration is currently open for informal educators. So that's zoo and aquarium educators, science museum educators, and formal educators as well. And so that will be a free course open to those in Canada. And so we're super excited to be partnering with them on that. And for those of you who are interested or maybe have a network of educators in Canada, we'd be happy for you to share the information. And, you know, I can share my contact information in the chat as well for that. So we're really excited to be moving this forward.
Great. All right. Thanks, Marissa. I appreciate it. We're now going to head north and bring in Kieran McIver, who's our manager of Churchill operations. However, Kieran's in the field today, so he's sharing his updates with us in a pre-recorded video. As you may all know, there's always quite a bit going on in Churchill. So here Kieran shares with us just one highlight from 2023 and a key priority for our Churchill-based work in 2024.
In Churchill, our work faces extreme environmental challenges all year round, which really puts our equipment and staff to the test. Conditions such as frigid temperatures, precipitation, high winds, and even submersion underwater in some cases means our gear must be able to withstand various forms of abuse. And to make matters even more challenging, Churchill's remote location means resources are often scarce, which makes maintenance and repairs challenging. Getting to our equipment outside of Churchill can mean lengthy skidoo rides or an expensive helicopter trip depending on the season, and establishing reliable high-speed internet connections in these locations also requires specialized expertise. It became clear very early on when I first started with PBI that planning and preparation is vital to success in the North. I now try to keep in mind the saying, if you have one, you have none. If you have two, you have one. And if you have three, you have a spare. Basically, this underlines the importance of having backups for our backups. So when we head out for our field seasons, we're all about meticulous planning and preparation. We break down every project step by step, anticipating any issues that might come up. We have learned to expect the unexpected, and during our 2023 season, we did have a few problems arise that impacted our internet connectivity on both Buggy 1 and the Tundra Buggy Lodge. In the end, resolving these issues resulted in the replacement of 2 cameras. We were running meters of new data cable, and we had to replace several pieces of networking equipment at both the Tundra Buggy Lodge and all the way up the telecommunications tower at the Churchill Northern Study Center. After multiple days of troubleshooting, our perseverance finally paid off, and we had successfully restored connectivity to the live cams. Continual improvement is ingrained in our approach, and we're constantly trying to seek opportunities to improve our process and surpass perceived limitations. In light of the challenges we had faced, we explored new solutions which led us to adopt Starlink for the very first time. The success of our first season with Starlink prompted us to transition our beluga boat operations as well. And starting this summer, when the beluga boat sets sail on July 15th, Explore.org will stream live beluga whale cameras using Starlink technology. Anticipation is high as we make our way into 2024. We're excited to be in the planning stages to deploy our new mobile telescoping camera tower in Wapusk National Park, replacing cameras we had removed this last spring. Scheduled for an early April journey spanning 65 kilometers to Cape Churchill, we aim to have the cameras operational by mid-April. Like our previous setup, the tower will feature 2 pan-tilt zoom cameras, providing year-round access for viewers to observe the diverse wildlife inhabiting the area. Additionally, we're introducing a new element to the tower, and we're calling it the perch cam. This addition will consist of a wooden perch that's fastened to the tower and equipped with its own designated camera to capture any birds that may visit the perch. Approaching the 1-year mark since the removal of the old camera, we're thrilled to install this new tower and feature Cape Churchill on the live cams once again.
Excellent. Well, that was quite an update, and I look forward to checking out our cams this year with Explore.org. Okay, this brings us to our final update with Emily Ringer, our Director of Policy and Advocacy, who, by the way, successfully defended her master's thesis last week. Congratulations, Emily. Emily, give us a backwards and forwards look from PBI's policy world.
Yes, thank you so much, Amy. So there was a lot of excitement for us in the policy department in 2023, but I think that one of the biggest highlights from last year was really the publishing of some very policy relevant data by our chief scientist, Dr. Stephen Amstrup, and our partner and friend, Dr. Cecilia Bitz. And if you joined the last Conservation Happy Hour, then you definitely heard a good amount about this research. The paper was published in the academic journal Science, and it was called, as you see here, Unlock the Endangered Species Act to Address Greenhouse Gas Emissions. And this research is really important in the policy sphere because since the polar bear was listed in the United States under the Endangered Species Act, and it was listed due to sea ice loss from climate change, but since that listing, a memo has restricted the government agency that oversees the Endangered Species Act and conservation, so that's Department of the Interior. That memo has restricted them from considering the effects of greenhouse gas emissions on polar bears when evaluating new projects. So essentially the main threat that the bear was listed for is not really something that the government is technically able to address as it currently stands. And at the time, this memo was issued as such because they said that the science could not attribute new projects, the amount of emissions from a new project to a precise impact on polar bear population. So they couldn't really separate that out from the cumulative impacts of emissions over decades. And so Steve and Cecilia's new research really overcame that primary restriction by quantifying, and you have a nice visual of it here, so quantifying a direct link between greenhouse gas emissions, sea ice loss, and polar bear survival. So what amount of greenhouse gas emissions results in this reduction of rate of survival for polar bears. And the government, under the Endangered Species Act, is required to use the best available science to inform species recovery plans. So the best available science is now updated, and we have new, really important information. So with this research in hand, last year, we were able to really start advocating for the Department of the Interior and for Fish and Wildlife Service to update their regulations and start considering greenhouse gas emission impacts on from new projects on polar bears. And we did that through a series. You know, this kind of advocacy is usually long and you need to take it from a bunch of different angles. So we submitted formal requests to members of the Department of Interior and Fish and Wildlife Service from Krista, our executive director, to rescind the memo. We've had some briefings with legal partners on the research so that they're aware of the new research and the science and might be able to employ that in future cases. We had a very, very successful media campaign led by our PR firm, Fabric. And, you know, this research was featured in the Associated Press. It was on CNN, it was in Forbes, it was on The Hill. And we planted some questions at the Marine Mammal Commission meeting to get a sense from Fish and Wildlife staff about how they were thinking about it. And then we also had an opportunity to meet with members of the Department of the Interior, and specifically the Deputy Secretary of the Interior, to formally present this research and ask that the memo be rescinded. And we will be continuing with this work in 2024. It's probably going to take a new shape. The policy agenda with in the United States with the upcoming election is definitely full, and that requires a different strategy. But we'll be pushing this forward strategically and strongly until we get it done. And then looking into 2023 or 2024, yeah, we're looking forward. In the spirit of that policy agenda in the United States being very, very full, and in the spirit of there being a lot of elections around the world that are really, really important this year, we are deciding to focus on a very, very targeted civic engagement campaign. So we're in the process of building that campaign. It doesn't need to be specific to this year, because there are always going to be opportunities for civic engagement, and that will remain to be important, but we'll really be launching it this year. And the goal is to highlight, I mean, you see here a call for voting, and of course that's a really, really important element of engagement, but also we recognize that there are many other ways that people can pressure decision makers in their communities and influence really local policies that have an impact on their communities and can also set an example for larger scale policies down the road. So our goal with this campaign is really to empower people to engage in a tangible way. So not just by telling people what's available to them, but how can we actually empower people to really do something with it. So we will be working on that, and regardless of outcomes in elections or around the world, this is something that will be continuing to build, so that it's a way that we can really elevate our community's impact on influencing policies that are hopefully good for polar bears and good for all of us. That's all I have.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you, team. That was quite the speed round on our work, and it's amazing that it takes us 27 minutes to give the highest of the highlights. So really impressive, and nice to have you all here. Just a reminder for those of you participating online, if you can enter your questions in the Q&A, we'll pivot into a question and answer opportunity here. I think we've set aside more time than usual for discussion, because we have so many people, so many of our staff present and involved today. So we'll try to get to all of them. I have a couple that I can start with, and I'll use your name first, or who I'm asking for. Marissa. People are wondering, how long have we had an Arctic Ambassador Center network?
Great question. So as the world's only organization whose sole focus is wild polar bear conservation, we do recognize the ongoing efforts, or the ongoing impact that zoos and aquariums have on our research and conservation efforts, and outreach as well. And this year, 2024, marks the 20-year anniversary of the Arctic Ambassador Center Network. And those are 49 institutions across North America and Europe that share a commitment with Polar Bears International to polar bear research, education, and climate action programming. And on top of that, because we've just been going through some planning, Climate Alliance, which was formerly Leadership Camp, the first year of Leadership Camp was also in 2004. So 20-year anniversary of that as well. Can't believe it. Time flies.
It really does. Amazing. All right. Well, actually, on a similar note, we were talking about Tundra Connections, and some of you might be familiar with Tundra Connections, and it's creeping up, I think, on a 20-year anniversary as well. Alysa, can you give us just a couple highlights from Tundra Connections in 2023 and anything to look for next year?
Yeah, so our Tundra Connections is kind of our flagship education program. It's our broadly our series of webcasts that we offer free online to anyone who's interested, mostly aimed at teachers in schools, but anyone can watch. And they've evolved quite a bit over the years, these webcasts. In 2023, we had one of the best year. Every year just gets better and better. So our webcasts mix in live footage of polar bears, videos, animations, photos, and then always involve Q&A with the kids that are watching. So they're really engaging, really fun. Last year, we reached over 3 million people with our online education outreach, which was super exciting. And a couple major highlights, we're working with the LEGO group. So LEGO came with our partners, Discovery Education, and we had a wonderful webcast called Build the Change, all about how play is imperative to changing the world, whether it's science or anything we're doing. You know, have fun with it, try again, work together. It was an absolute blast working with the LEGO group. And they also donated 228 pounds of LEGO bricks to the Churchill school, which we were very grateful for. Kind of separate but related to Tender Connections, you know, we do a lot of educational efforts across the world. We also, it kind of falls under the umbrella, I guess. We do one-on-one events with schools. In some cases, we can't always accommodate because there's so many requests, but one thing we really prioritize is working with Connected North, which is a group in Canada. They work with or under Taking It Global. And Connected North specifically, it's a network of northern schools, remote, rural, across northern Canada. And a lot of these schools have a hard time even getting an internet access. And a lot of these schools have kids that do live with or very close to polar bears and have a lot of their own experiences with polar bears. So we love working with Connected North schools, particularly across Nunavut. We get to come kind of say, here's what we know about polar bears. What do you know? And we have these amazing kind of two-way conversations with kids. It's a blast. So we're really looking forward to 2024. We've already done more Connected North connections this year than we did all of last year. So it's really ramping up. And then Tender Connections this fall, we think will be better than ever. We're going to make them just like little TV shows combined with some curriculum. So we're really excited to keep improving.
Excellent. Okay, stuff to look forward to. Yeah, the Lego stuff was super fun. The kids, when they came to the school and they asked them to build something that would help keep polar bears and people safe, and just very clever ideas, and a lot of fun to see that happening. Plus the hundreds of pounds of Legos left behind. It's pretty awesome. All right, Geoff, I have one difficult one and one softball. Which one do you want first? Geoff York?
Yes, let's start with the hard one. Why not?
Okay. All right. The hard one is we've been hearing quite a bit about partners. They hear us say partner over and over again on these webcasts. Can you talk a little bit about how Polar Bears International sort of philosophy around partnership helps us punch above our weight?
Absolutely. I would say across our departments, our work would be impossible without partners. And it means different things in different areas. In research, we literally, to do the work we do in the field, we need our government partners, we need our academic partners who often carry the permits to allow the work to happen and run that side of the field for us, if you will. We need government support to do some of the work we do there as well. And then we need a variety of other types of support. A good example this year was in Svalbard with our close partners at San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance. We needed their technical assistance in the field to really dig into these den cams, make sure they were running fully operational. And then also we had them support us with some drone work to help us locate dens. So it's everything from remote support to on-the-ground support, permit support, and data sharing across partners as well. That varies with our education work, it varies with our policy work too, but our partners broadly help us amplify the research we can do. They help amplify our outreach. They help amplify our education.
Excellent. Okay, now are you ready for the softball question?
Sure. I thought that was the softball question.
Right. All right. This one is, are we sure a newborn cub is the size of a stick of butter, or is a cub the equivalent of a 1 pound box of butter, which is 4 sticks?
Exactly that. I would say it's equivalent to a brick of butter, which is much more common in our European and some of our Canadian markets where sticks are less common. That's very much of an American thing. So I would say the size of a brick of butter. Good catch.
A brick of butter. Okay, well, I'll work on our terminology. It's a brick of butter, not a stick of butter. Perfect. Thank you. All right, you are off the hot seat for a little bit. Emily, I'm going to put you on the hot seat. We have a question. Are there any national policies, issues, which are represented on this year's election ballots? And I'm going to make the assumption that that's US. I know we have folks from both US and Canada, but and possibly international. But are there key issues on the ballots, or is this more about candidates, or what should people be thinking about as they go out to vote this year?
That's a great question. And on a national scale, it's definitely more about candidates. So looking at a candidate's positions, looking at their history of voting on various initiatives, looking at their priorities, and understanding that we're voting for people based on what they say that they will do for us. And of course, that it doesn't always work out that way, but it's the best informed choice that we can really make. So it is really important to understand a candidate's history and a candidate's priorities as they are proposing it to you, and looking, for really anything about, I guess it depends, but when we're thinking about polar bears, we're really thinking about climate change. And so looking for any sort of remotely climate-oriented policy, or talk of a national climate plan, talk of emissions reductions, talk of environmental justice initiatives. Those are really, those are good key things to be looking for. And that's part of what I'm hoping that this campaign, I'm hoping we can kind of build and share a very general sense or list of things that people can look for, because then on a state level, initiatives on ballots are going to be really variable, and they will be much, much more specific. So that's usually going to be less about the general goals of a politician, and you're going to see some really, really detailed stuff there. So I can't speak, of course, to all of the states in the US and what's going to be on those ballots, but that's another piece that I'm really hoping to have as part of this campaign, is connecting people to the places and resources so they can figure out very specifically what will be on there. So that's something to look for, because I'm not sure what state or where that question is coming from, but I'm hoping to offer the resource so that people can really have the information and research ahead of time.
Great, thank you. We've heard too a lot lately about people thinking about sitting this one out, particularly in the US. They're maybe upset with their choices and considering sitting out the election. What would you say to someone who was considering sort of sitting out the whole process?
Yeah, it's complicated times, and I think we are, we're in a really unique moment from the climate perspective, and ultimately, I think, engaging in voting in one way or another, we never are going to tell anyone who to vote for, but it's like really the single most important way that we can have some sort of influence, and choosing not to engage in any way, shape, or form isn't necessary. It's not really it's taking yourself, I guess, out of the game. And I think like the difficult thing is, even if you don't like your options, voting for one person is not necessarily a full-scale endorsement of everything that they offer. We might be choosing at various times, and this happens throughout history. We're often choosing between different things, or two less than ideal situations. So I think that I can't, underscore enough the importance of participation, and I certainly understand that there's a tremendous amount to consider. But in terms of climate policy and this moment, it's really, really important that we maintain the momentum that we have with some of the current legislation, at least in the US. And so I would, encourage you to find the politician that's going to represent that the most, and even if they're not perfect, to put your vote behind them.
Okay, great perspective. Thank you. All right, the next one, and I'm not sure, I might need to, maybe I'll answer this one. The next one is, do you offer any short videos that would work for civic group presentations? And the short answer is yes, we do. We have a number of different video assets, we call them, and we're currently revamping our About PBI video, which is a good one for that sort of thing. And we certainly do encourage and appreciate folks who want to go out there in their community and talk about our work, and try to leverage folks in their community to take action on climate on behalf of polar bears. So definitely reach out if that's something you're interested in doing. Megan Spranger, who's one of our hosts this evening and is on in the chat with you, can definitely connect with you if that's something you're interested in doing in your community, in your network, in your circle of supporters. We really appreciate you. Again, being one of our partners to help increase our capacity and help us to continue to punch above our weight. I have one question here that is about polar bears in captivity in our zoo and aquarium settings, and how are they doing? And I think that is something that also I can start, and then I'll pitch it over to Marissa. And I can say that, you know, for many years I worked in a zoo with polar bears, and I have really enjoyed seeing the evolution over the last 20-25 years in the way that polar bears are cared for in our zoos and aquariums, and can vouch for the passion with which people embark on trying to provide the best quality care that they can. People like to tell stories about animals and their situations, and often I will say that you need to see the movie, not just the snapshot. So people, certainly zoo and aquarium detractors, often post videos of worst case scenarios. I would encourage you to spend some time looking at the best case scenarios and some of the animals that are really thriving in those settings. And as Marissa talked about, and maybe I'll pitch it back to her, there's just enormous capacity for outreach about conservation of polar bears to the zoo and aquarium visitor community, which looks a lot different than the population that is probably tuning into this broadcast, for example. So Marissa, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a great introduction. Thank you, Amy. Sorry, it's trying to remove a box from my screen. And, you know, so like I mentioned before that, you know, there are accrediting body for zoos and aquariums, and primarily in North America, there's the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And we know that those accredited institutions are seeing over 200 million visitors a year come through their gates. But I think the other important piece of that, and the important thing to remember, is that these visitors also represent a broad demographic of their community. And we know from the social science research that they're coming to zoos and aquariums, looking to zoo and aquarium staff as trusted messengers. So they expect to hear about species conservation and what they can do to help. And they're also meeting them with a level of trust, these zoo and aquarium staff, that's often even higher than, let's say, non-governmental organizations like Polar Bears International, which is just incredible. And, you know, on the other piece, especially with our Arctic Ambassador Center network, it's not just about the outreach. The animal care staff, veterinary staff, research staff at these Arctic Ambassador Centers are also participating in important research projects and helping to close some of those key knowledge gaps that are questions that are hard to study or impossible to study in the wild, and connecting zoo-based conservation science with wild polar bear researchers is a priority of ours, and can then also help inform the conservation of the species in the wild. Did that answer?
Thank you. Absolutely. You know, it's a really complex question, and people, you know, reasonable people can disagree and fall and on all sorts of places on that spectrum about how they feel about it. But as I say, I really feel strongly that the quality of care that's being provided to polar bears and the quality of their habitats these days in zoological institutions is pretty darn impressive.
It's a great question. I think, like Amy, you even said this to me once, like, if we're not asking that question, you know, as animal care staff at zoos and aquariums, then maybe, you know, we're all asking ourselves the right those questions, right? Like, how can we constantly improve the welfare of the animals in our care? And
right, absolutely. Well, and another thing I think, you know, if you haven't been to a zoo in 20 years, you should go, is something I also say. It's a very different experience than when many of us were young. And then the other thing is to know the provenance of the animals, right? They are no longer being bought and sold the way that they were many years ago. These animals were either born in zoos or were orphans that wouldn't survive in the wild. Particularly speaking about polar bears, and many other species are injured or orphaned or rescued wildlife. So it's a very different industry, if you will, than it used to be. And they've really pivoted into animal welfare, conservation, and research. Okay, let's see. How can we support PBI's effort to amplify Dr. Amstrup's research, which will hopefully increase the efforts to protect polar bears under the ESA? So Emily, how can our listeners support this change in policy based on that new science?
Also a great question, and thank you so much for the enthusiasm. That's the big reason that we love our community, is because you all are often so excited to be engaged in this. And so, so far our advocacy efforts on behalf of that research have been, much more behind the scenes. We, as I mentioned, might be pivoting some of that for the coming year. There may be opportunities for our community to engage in more of sort of a public outreach piece, where we would build the tools for you to strategically reach out to members of the federal government. We're still sort of figuring out, the timing of that sort of thing is really, really important. So we're still figuring out what that would look like and how we could do that most strategically. But until that sort of opportunity that's, more explicitly allows you to advocate on behalf of this research comes up, I would just encourage, and we're happy to provide some background on this. We have quite a bit on our website that describes, the development of this research and the influence that it may have. So we're happy to describe or to share those resources with you. And I would really, really encourage, at any level of public policy or decision maker that you might have the opportunity to connect with, to just raise awareness about it. Because I think that's a really big part of it is, these studies come out, the research is updated, there's new science, and it takes a long time for us to get everybody on board to seeing that we can make different decisions and different policies, because we now have new information. So even I think, at the local level, if that's, you have an opportunity to talk to someone, and just educating people about it and talking about it is a really, really important piece of it. And it's kind of, that's the slow version of policy change, but it's an essential foundation to that policy change. So we're happy I can pull together some resources on or communications pieces about that and share that to give you hopefully an opportunity to start having conversations about it in your community.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We did have two quick questions in the chat that I just want to also answer live, since not everyone can see the chat or is following along. One is, you don't have much merchandise on your website. What about t-shirts? And I would say that that's a conscious choice to not have a ton of merchandise. We, certainly think about consumerism and climate. We do, of course, have opportunities for symbolic adoptions and other kinds of purchases you can make for family and friends, but we don't produce a lot of merchandise. And if you visited us in Churchill, you'll notice that we also don't sell items up in Churchill. And that's, again, a conscious choice to respect the fact that the locals are trying to make a living in that community. And we don't want to be competing ever with those who are trying to create an opportunity for themselves economically in Churchill. So it's true, it is somewhat hard to come by Polar Bears International merchandise. And then the other question was whether we'd be sharing this video. And indeed, if you registered, you will receive by email a link to the video, and we very much appreciate it if you share it with others who you think might be interested. Okay, we have another one here. We do talk quite a bit to the United States and Canada in regards to policy and awareness. How much are we able to influence the likes of India and China regarding their impact on the climate and thus polar bears? So the question really gets at what about these other parts of the world, and are they doing their part? And what might come as a surprise, and I'll take this one really quickly, but what might come as a surprise is some of these countries, while they are producing a lot of emissions, are actually in some cases moving more quickly than we are in the energy transition. China, for example, I believe launched more or deployed more solar panels last year than the rest of the world combined. So they are still polluting, they're still putting out carbon, but they're trying to meet their growing demand with renewables, which is exciting. our ability to work and influence directly in the international community can be a little limited in terms of working with them directly. Geoff, you're Senior Director of Research and Policy. I wonder, can you talk a little bit about that, our ability to influence sort of the international policy sphere?
Sure. I think our biggest bang for the buck on that is our tremendous outreach. A PBI for a small organization that's single species focused really hits above our weight in terms of our media specifically. And that media is global, and we are talking about, significant Arctic and polar bear issues to that broad audience. And that's how we can get sort of the best information out to policymakers in some of those other countries and to their public in places where the public has some, say over how things are run. Not the case in China, clearly. But that's really our best bet, is to work in that media sphere right now, where we can really amplify well beyond North America and Europe into those other regions, and at least get the most current information in people's hands.
Absolutely. And speaking of partners, so Fabric Media that works with us to work with our with film companies and reporters and journalists that are interested, they calculate our total reach. And last year it was over 5 billion people contacted about polar bear storytelling opportunities. So pretty incredible, the number of people who do actually get exposed in some way to the story of polar bears and their sea ice habitat being affected by climate change in a given year due to that expansive reach. So thank you for that. I am out of questions. We're a little early. I can take one or two more, but in the meantime, I'm wondering, I want to make sure that before we wrap up, that we talk about an opportunity that's coming up to travel with Polar Bears International to Churchill, Manitoba this August. So you're invited to join our team for a unique adventure to see wildlife, visit the PBI Interpretive Center and the Mars Center, and connect with PBI staff in person. So if you're interested, connect with Megan Spranger, again, who's hosting the chat. She'll put her name and contact information in there, and we can hopefully join you on the tundra, which would be very exciting. It's a beautiful place in the summer. I think I might get there this year. I'm very excited to spend some time. And this is a unique opportunity to actually travel with Polar Bears International staff to this unique part of the subarctic. So we want to invite you to that. Okay, last chance for Q&A. Anybody have another question? I don't think it's very beautiful here in Portland, Oregon, so I'm not sure everyone will mind. And depending on what it's like where you are, not everyone will mind if we wrap up a few minutes early. Okay, we're going to give everyone the gift of time. Thank you so much for the panelists for a great discussion today. And thank you, Albert, who's always behind the scenes running the webinar and putting up the visuals that help us tell our stories. And a huge heartfelt thanks to everyone in the audience for your interest in this topic and for your commitment to polar bear conservation. We're excited to continue this work with you in the year to come. And again, what we do wouldn't be possible without your support. So we are deeply, deeply grateful and look forward to talking to you next time. Have a great afternoon.